Great. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the YRBiz Roadmap to Recovery series. My name is Karen Dubois, and I'm your MC for this session. We're so glad you could join us today. And today's topic is about consumer movement and marketing. And we're so excited to have a great presenter with Environics Analytics. He's going to be showing us some pretty amazing technology, but also talking about how patterns really have changed. And hopefully this is helpful for you as you're considering your business planning for the future. Before we get started, I would like to invite Charles Banfield from the region of York to say a few words of welcome. Charles?
Thanks, Karen, and hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. As Karen said, my name is Charles Banfield, and I'm the Manager of Strategic Economic Initiatives at the Regional Municipality of York. And today's event is the fifth in a series of webinars that have been designed to provide a roadmap to post-COVID economic recovery. These webinars provide information and resources that can help businesses navigate the current economic environment and make the necessary adjustments to their operations to enable them to thrive in a post-pandemic economy. In a previous webinar, we learned about how consumer spending behaviors have changed due to the pandemic. And today's session will explore how people's movements around their communities and business areas have changed over the past 5 months or so. And this is information that can be extremely valuable for guiding business planning in these uncertain times. I wish to thank the Newmarket and Vaughan Chambers of Commerce and the York Region Business Coalition, who continue to partner with us in developing and delivering this webinar series. And I'd like to extend a special thank you to today's presenter and to Karen Dubois for organizing this event. Thank you all once again for joining us today, and back to you, Karen. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Charles. And before we get started, just a few housekeeping items. Today's session is being recorded, and we will be sending you the link to the recording afterwards. So you don't have to feel like you have to madly write down information you're getting. You will get a copy of the link recording within 24 hours following this session. There is a Q&A function in the Zoom platform that we're using. We encourage you to use either the Q&A or the chat. That's how we're going to be collating questions for our presenter. The last 15 minutes of the session today, which runs from 12 to 1 o'clock, will be dedicated to Q&A. So we do encourage you to submit any questions you have for him. And we also have a polling function that you will see on your screens. A poll will pop up. Occasionally, it's just a quick response. You can elect to participate or not. It's just a way of for us to get a sense of where you're at as a company and the types of issues that you're facing. So if you can participate, we'd welcome your feedback through the polling function. The other thing I just wanted to take a minute to talk about, and I'm going to share my screen, are two programs that I'd like to just bring to your attention, largely because they have due dates that are looming. So the first one is the Entrepreneurship and Innovation Fund, and this is funded through York Region, and you can get all the details at venturelab.ca/innovation fund. And this is funding that will provide some financial support for promising startups, accelerators, and community organizations. Particular in the organizations, those that are involved in promoting innovation or entrepreneurship, and there's up to $10,000 for those organizations. And for qualified small businesses and entrepreneurs, there's up to $15,000 of grant funding to help you grow your innovative business or to contribute towards business continuity and recovery efforts. The deadline, though, is tomorrow, so if you want to take advantage of that, I highly encourage you to go to Venture Lab's website and check that out. And the other program that is got some tight timelines on it, so if you haven't participated, we encourage you to, is the Go Canada United. And this initiative does two things. One is to encourage everybody to shop and dine locally this weekend, August 28th to 30th. And they have some great cash prizes that are available to be won. Each time someone participates in Canada United on social media, RBC contributes 5 cents towards a fund. We had Rocco Rossi from the Ontario Chamber of Commerce here last week, and he said they had already exceeded their $2 million target. So this is a great fund that is dedicated for helping small businesses, those that are 1 to 75 employees, and they can apply for a grant of up to $5,000 for either the acquisition of PPE for your employees, renovating their physical spaces, or developing and improving e-commerce capabilities. The deadline for that is the 31st, I think. I have to double check that, but I'll do that and put a note in the chat. But you can get information at gocanadaunited.ca, and we do encourage you, if you're able to participate in Shop Local this weekend, please do so, and do take advantage of the opportunity for grant funding. So with that, we'll get started today. I'm going to introduce our guest speaker, Nada Sharia from Environics Analytics. And they've been doing some amazing work in taking data from mobile devices to actually map where people are going. So we've often heard that some people are leaving home, but they're only going certain places. We've heard that some people working from home aren't commuting anymore, and so they are shopping more locally, close to where they live. And some of these things are just conjecture. So with the work that Environics Analytics does, you can actually see what's happening. And we'll be taking a closer look at 2 areas in the New York region, the Vaughan Metropolitan Center area and the Newmarket Main Street area. So being a data geek myself, this is extremely interesting for me. I hope you're going to like it too. And we're very, very pleased to have Nutter with us today. So I'll hand it off to you, Nutter. Take it away.
Thanks very much, Karen. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Charles, for the invitation and for the opportunity to speak to you. And thank you, Tyler, for making the tech side of things so painless for me. So we're all set up. I'm about to share my screen, and I think we should be off to the races. Someone want to let me know, make sure that everything's okay? All good? We got a thumbs up. Excellent. So as Karen mentioned, my name is Nada Sharia. I'm with Environics Analytics. I handle the public sector side of things over at Environics. I actually come from a public sector background. I spent a number of years in Service Canada. I was managing the market research function for EI, for CPP, and for OAS. I have a background in marketing, market research, and sociology. I ended up teaching for a number of years at the college level in the areas of market research and public relations and advertising. And this sort of intersection between data and engagement with constituents and with populations, with residents is a really fascinating intersection for me. And that's why I've been with this company for 4 years now, with the focus on making data available at the public sector level for the purpose of doing good, planning appropriately, and making more informed and sophisticated decisions using data and using analytics as a key driver. Now, I'm going to tell you a little bit about our company before I move forward with some of our, I guess, case studies, use cases. We are an analytics company, and that means we deal in data. We collect data from a number of different sources, about 85 different sources in all. We repackage the data in a number of different categories that span the spectrum of Canadian life. And we use that data, we align that data with the 6-digit postal code. And that makes it available at a very small area of geography so that you can understand what is happening on the ground by using data sources that normally would have been disparate and could not speak together or to each other. We were founded in 2003. Our focus is really on consumer and citizen insight. It's on media and channel optimization, on location intelligence. And we have a number of clients across every industry sector. We have a couple of hundred employees, all of whom are working remotely right now and have been since March 16th. And we just got the email yesterday telling us that we can expect to be doing the same through to early next year, at least, which is both a blessing and a curse in many ways, right? So we help our clients with adopting data-driven strategies. We clean and enhance data. We help clients understand their populations of interest, their markets of interest. We help analyze markets through understanding geography and what's happening at that intersection between people and places. And because everything is so data-driven, we're able to connect execution to evaluation and measure results. And these are the areas where we tend to focus a lot of our efforts in consumer segments and personas, media planning, product assortment, cross-selling, market analysis, and so on. Now, this is one of our flagship products, and the reason I want to bring it up for you today is that it's going to feature a lot in the analyses that I've done for the three areas, for the two areas, for Vaughan Metropolitan Center and for the Newmarket Main Street section. This is called Prism. It's our lifestyle segmentation system. And what it does is it takes Canada's entire population at the household level, at the postal code level, and there are almost 800,000 postal codes. And each one of Canada's residential postal codes is assigned one of these 67 lifestyle segments. And each one of these segments is each one of these segments is unique and mutually exclusive of the other, while at the same time, they all share certain commonalities, like the level of urbanity, for example, or the level of affluence or level of education and things like that. So it's possible to look at them independently and discretely, while at the same time, it's possible to loop them all together, loop a whole bunch of them together and create larger optimized market groupings. And if you'd like to learn about which segment your neighborhood belongs to, you can simply enter this link that I have on the screen and plug in your residential postal code, and it will tell you which one of the 67 segments your neighborhood is assigned, along with all sorts of information, demographic, wealth information, attitudinal, sort of like, social value type information, and all sorts of other stuff. Now, one of the reasons that we were sort of invited to speak today was because of a new product that we recently launched called Mobilescapes. It's a suite of products actually, and excuse me, and it comes in 3 different forms. It comes in a form where you can actually self-serve. It comes in a form that allows you to sort of request custom reports that are generated on a regular basis. And it comes in the form of being able to provide you insight on 2 major themes: origin and destination, based on mobile data. Now, what that means is we're able to basically understand where people are coming, where people are leaving from, and what types of people are visiting specific geography, specific spaces. Now, Mobilescapes is completely privacy compliant. It's based on permission-based aggregation of mobile devices, geolocation pings based on user opt-in when they download certain apps. And so with a collection of over 100,000 different apps, what we're able to do is collect and aggregate and anonymize these mobile device pings. And because we are experts in geodemography, we're able to then link back the mobile device pings to the postal codes to get at some real meaty information about our markets of interest. So the mobile device, the mobile data in a little bit more detail here. It's anonymized, it's permission-based, and it's completely privacy compliant. It's collected from location-enabled apps on mobile devices. So you download an app. Part of the terms and conditions of using the app is that whenever you turn it on, you accept that it's going to run a ping that identifies your location, or the device's location anyway. That device location gets collected and aggregated and de-identified. And then it gets collected with a whole bunch of other device locations, and then those clusters of device locations are brought to us, and we're able to do all sorts of really cool stuff with them. Now, one of the products of the MobileScape suite of product is a product we have called Out and About, and what it does is it looks at the rate of movement out of someone's home. So what it looks at is it collects the mobile device location data based on which devices are leaving their home at a minimum of 500 meters from their home location. And by home location, I'm talking about the postal code, Centroid, and are away from that home location for at least 30 minutes. Once those two parameters are identified, then the geolocation pings are collected through the Out and About product. And what that does is it gives us an idea of who is moving around and who is leaving their home at the neighborhood level, and which neighborhoods are seeing greater rates of movement and which neighborhoods are seeing lower rates of movement. And this can be broken down by times of day of week, by week and month and year and so on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through what we've seen in York region over the last couple of years. And in sum, what we've done here is we've collected the movement rates for York region as a whole for both 2019 and 2020. Now, for 2020, our data is available up to, up to the month of July for Out and About, although for geofencing, for another product within the product suite, it's available for as recently as August 22nd. Now, what we're seeing here in this chart is we start off at the beginning of the year in January, fairly even with January 2019, and we start seeing a convergence, a minor convergence or a divergence, sorry, in February as the news started making its way about COVID, about the risks, and about its moving into North America and so on. And then, as you can see here, we see a substantial drop in the rate of movement out of people's homes and out of their neighborhoods by March of 2020, where we see a 20% drop in movement. And then in mid-March, as you all know, the emergency measures were put in place, and we saw an even steeper drop where we saw about 30% lower rates of movement happening in April. And as you go through the list, we see that in May it goes to 32%, and then it starts increasing incrementally through June and July into a 24% decrease and a 19% decrease. So we start seeing a slight rate of movement upwards, but it's gradual and consistent, and it seems to be trending in this direction to a great extent. Although as you'll see later on, some of the numbers are quite stark in terms of the the percentage change of visitors to certain spaces across the region. Now, just for reference here, this is what Newmarket looks like. So the dark purple line is Newmarket, and the light purple line is York Region as the benchmark. And as you can see, it's very similar. Excuse me. As you can see, it's very similar, but excuse me one moment. So it follows the same pattern between Newmarket and York Region as a whole, and that seems to be the case for pretty much the entire GTA. No matter where you go and what area, what geography you run, you end up seeing the same basic trend, moving from very normal activity from February down to very low activity into May, and then seeing an incremental increase. Now the question then becomes, when you see this, you're like, okay, well, that's interesting, but of the people who are going out, where are they going, and who's staying in, and so on, right? And this is where the out and about data gets really interesting, because we're able to actually pull out key numbers around not just the number of devices that are out and about, but where they are most likely going, and what time of day we're seeing the greatest fluctuations in movement. So I've highlighted the rows here that show the greatest percentage change between 2020 between 2019 and 2020. So you'll see, for example, 9 p.m. to 12 a.m. March 2020, we see a rate of movement of 168,000 devices. When you compare that against March 2019 for the total month count at 310,000 devices, we are seeing a 46% drop of people going out between 9 p.m. and midnight on the whole for the month of March. That is a substantial drop. And that represents a drop in people going out to dinner, going out to the bar, going out to see friends, going out to the clubs, and so on. So you see that you can tell immediately that there's some stark realities that are very empirically sort of stated here about the measures that were put in place and the impact that those measures had. Now, if we go down to the second or the third row there, March for furthest distance traveled from home, we see that the distance traveled from home shrank by over half, by 57%, whereas the total aggregate number of kilometers traveled by York Region residents in March 2019 was 16,237,000. The March 2020 total dropped to 7,014,000 kilometers. Conversely, you see the same thing, similar trends when it comes to the number of minutes spent away from home, from an aggregate total of 269 million minutes in March 2019 to a drop of 165 million minutes in March 2020. Now, what's also interesting about out and about is that you can also identify where people are going, because what we've done as part of the product launch is we have geofenced about 40,000 different buildings and spaces across the country, and that number continues to grow. And by geofencing, I mean we draw a digital border around it on a dynamic map that isolates that space and allows us to request that the software identify the number of devices that it can find within that space given a specific duration. And so what we're able to do when, like, for example, if we're looking at commuting, we're able to identify the movement between residential areas and business districts. For visiting a green space, what we've done is we have actually drawn perimeters, digital perimeters around parks and green spaces across the region. And so the same applies to heavy rail and transit and visiting a commercial location for shopping purposes. And what we're seeing in these cases as well is that literally across all fronts, except for commuting in March, we saw a severe drop in the rate of movement to all these spaces, anywhere where people really converged in a meaningful way, where a lot of strangers converged in a meaningful way, whether it's a mall or a plaza or a park, we saw tremendous drops. So what about when the restrictions started getting lifted? How does that start to look? And the picture looks good. The picture looks encouraging, because what we're seeing here is we're seeing a lot more movement. So we looked at the rate of movement between 9 p.m. and midnight over the course of the month of March in 2019 and 2020. And if you recall, in March 2020, the rate of movement dropped to 168,000 devices. Sorry, I'm a little confused here. So I'll get back to that, but we also see that I'm sorry, I have the numbers turned around here. So what says July should say March, I believe. My apologies for this. I'm going to skip over this one and look at Newmarket and try and figure out what the problem is there. So let's look at Newmarket here. So what we're seeing for Newmarket as a whole for the months of March 2020 versus 2019 is another severe drop in nighttime outings, both from 9 p.m. to midnight and from 12 a.m. to 6 a.m. And we also see a tremendous drop in, obviously, heavy rail transit, and a 60% drop in the distance traveled between 2019 and 2020. So the same problem seems to have come up here, and I think I just caught a bug, so excuse me for this. But we're going to switch over to the Vaughan Metropolitan Center here. And I believe at this point, you should be seeing a poll of some sort come up. Well, while you do that, I'm going to introduce the Vaughan Metropolitan Center use case here. So what we did here was we identified an area within the VMC, sort of on the northeast side of the 401 and the 7. This is the area that contains the Lowe's and the Walmart and a number of other places, including the TTC station. And what I did was I ran the numbers for the number of visitors who came to this area in April 2019, April 2020, July 2019, and July 2020. And what we're going to do over the next few slides is do a review, run a bit of a review of the visits, and look at the different types of visitors that came to this area over the course of these different periods, and look at where the opportunities would be were you a business that's looking at understanding how to engage and how to increase the rate of visitation in a sort of a period of relaxation of safety measures. So the April 2019 visit total for that section of the VMC sat at 269,151 total visits. In April of 2020, we saw it drop to 122,219 for a percentage change of 55%. So, and in 2019, in July 2019, the number jumps from April 2019 to 316,000, and we see it at 163,864 for July 2020. Now, year over year, that represents a drop of 48%, which sounds like it's not terrible, not terribly good news. But if we look at the number as compared, when we compare the number between April 2020 and July 2020, we see an increase of 46,000 total visits, which is fairly substantial. Now, when I ran a profile, a PRISM profile of the visitors to this section of the VMC, I noted that between April 2020 and July 2020, a substantial increase in the number of visitors came from segments that are predominantly multicultural. And I've highlighted them here on this slide. They're composed of 4 different segments called Multiculturalish, South Asian Enterprise, Multicultural Corners, and Metro Melting Pot. And we saw an increase of 37%, 21%, 34%, and 24%, respectively, for all of them. Now, that's all well and good, but then the question becomes, okay, well, if these are the types of people who are showing a higher rate of potential movement, then why are, who are they, and how do I communicate with them, right? And that's what the next slide is about. So for these, what I've done here is I've basically pulled together these 4 segments so that I can have a look at an aggregated view of the lifestyle type and the demographics and so on of this grouping of segments, this cluster of specific segments. So what I'm seeing from this group is that they sit at an average household income of 133,000. This is average as compared to York Region as a whole. They are primarily homeowners, very few rent by comparison, and they live in relatively new homes, where, well, 20% of them live in relatively new homes that are no more than 14 years old. And if we look at the income distribution, what we see is, there's a substantial spike in incomes that are relatively higher than the average. So this is a fairly affluent group that is choosing to move around a little bit more. So that's a first sign that I would say that I would flag to say, look, this is a potential opportunity. So what else are they like? One of the values that we bring to the market as a whole is our ability to link, as I've said before, data together in a multitude of ways from a number of different sources. And what I've done here is pulled the social values, these underlying motivators that drive decision making in people. And the top 3 strong values for this cluster of segments is having a strong work ethic, is having a bit of an aversion to technology, and is having a belief in a strong sense of duty. Conversely, ethical consumerism is not a very strong value for this group. They do not buy products based on ethical, whatever ethical standards might be of concern to other markets. This group does not index high for personal control. And what that means is they live a little bit more spontaneously and have a sort of a belief in the value of fate. And whereas, you know, on the one hand, they do believe in duty, their fulfillment does not come from their duty to work. It comes from their fulfillment. It comes from their duty to others. So I'd also want to know how to communicate with them. And so what I'm looking at here is their media habits. And from what this profile tells me, this group is not to be reached through standard or traditional media platforms or media channels, except for maybe using radio stations that stream top 40 hits. However, they do tend to index high and tend to be avid users of both Twitter and Snapchat. So in an economic development setting, in a business development setting, in an attempt to engage this audience, I would look at those platforms as a potential tool through which to interact with them. And to round out our understanding of where they spend their time and therefore their money, these are the types of activities and attractions that draw them on a normal year in a normal setting. So while COVID might have changed, you know, a few of these items, you can bet that these guys are back out and spending some time on the soccer pitch with friends. They're having fun at the open basketball courts, and they're definitely taking advantage of watching racing online and things like that. And they're going to be replacing these other activities like nightclubs and amusement centers with things like gaming and watching comedy shows on Netflix and things like that. Now, in terms of their other activities, the activities that they actually participate in, soccer, football, baseball. So you're going to see them. These are the types of people that are more likely to sign up and register and start moving along from a parks and recreation perspective. So from a rec planning perspective, these are more of a low-hanging fruit. Now, other insights that were gleaned from this group, or from the VMC mobile device observations, was the stark drop year over year between April 19 and April 2019 and April 2020 of the 10 most affluent segments that live in York region, and obviously Vaughan within that. And so these segments, the 10 of them saw an overall decrease of about 63% in their movement to the VMC space, and that represents a substantial number of households with a very high income and an incredibly high discretionary income. So that is a red flag in many ways, and it would remain a red flag if we didn't see the bounce back being so positive by July 2020. So whereas we see in many cases that a lot of these segments did start coming back by July 2020 to the VMC to do their shopping and potentially to take the subway as well. We did see that a couple of the segments still show a continued decrease, like Turbo Burbs, which is seeing a further decrease of 13% since April 2020, and Boomer Bliss, which sees a further decrease of 47% from April 2020. But overall, this group of the 10 most affluent segments in the area have reached 87% of their April 2019 visitation numbers. So that's sort of a good news story. Is it appropriate to ask if there are any if there's any interest in some questions here, or shall I hold off? I guess I'll hold off. We've got a few more minutes. Now, lastly, I want to show you what I did for Main Street in Newmarket. Now, Newmarket, what we're going to do here is we're going to go through a simple town demographic profile. So I've profiled the entire town of Newmarket, and I've run 2 periods of mobile data: January 1st to August 22nd, 2019, and January 1st to August 22nd, 2020. And then we're going to start digging a little bit deeper into the insights of different visitors. So I'm sure you're fairly familiar with the look of these slides by now. We've got a population of 91,000. What's interesting, one of the interesting sort of demographic characteristics of Newmarket is that as it compares to York Region as a whole, it over-indexes for lone parent families. So there's, what that means is, as a percentage of the population of Newmarket as a whole, there is a higher percentage of lone parent families when compared to the benchmark population of York Region as a whole. Overall, the household income is very healthy. There's a substantial rate of home ownership. Homes in Newmarket tend to be older than we saw in Vaughan, for example. And education, it's slightly lower than the average for York Region in terms of the attainment of university degrees. But there is a higher rate of labor force participation than York Region on average. Not many people do take public transit though. That tends to be on the lower side here in Newmarket. And when we ran the numbers for Main Street, so what we did was we isolated, we're working with Karen, I isolated the section of Main Street in Newmarket where the perimeter to the north was Queen Street and to the south it was Water Street. And what I did was I looked at all the sort of front-facing buildings along Main Street, and I incorporated as well the tennis courts in the area. So in 2019, we recorded observations in the amount of 89,913 visits between January 1st and August 22nd. In 2020, we recorded a total of 27,477 visits to Main Street for the same period, representing a change of minus 60%, which is substantial. And that is the challenge that a lot of main streets are having in Canada's medium and smaller sized cities and towns, is the substantial drop in the number of visitors has proven to be, and I'm sure I'm not saying anything that no one or that anyone doesn't know already, has proven to be extremely difficult for a lot of business owners in the area. Now, when I started looking a little bit deeper into what those numbers actually meant, I noticed a couple of things really stood out. There were some low affluence segments or lower income segments that represent a much higher proportion of visitors in 2020. And there's a very real opportunity to draw in a higher affluence set of segments because of the rate of penetration in the number of visitors that were observed through the mobile observations. And so I'm going to dig a little bit deeper into those. But first, I want to show you the distance decay, between 2019 and 2020. And it's so interesting, given the drop in the numbers between the 2 years. It's so interesting that this distance decay for 2019 tells me that about 84% came from about a 3-kilometer radius, which represents a good portion of Newmarket. But the 2020 picture looks almost virtually the same. There is a slight bump on at the 3-kilometer mark, but we are seeing virtually the same types of people coming in. Well, the same people from the same areas coming in, but at a much lower rate. So there hasn't been a change in terms of the geographies from which people are visiting, but it's the actual volume that's been impacted. And I think that's a key distinction that this distance decay identifies. And so presented visually, this is what it looks like. So the darker portions represent dissemination areas where you're seeing a greater rate of movement towards the red dot, and the lighter portions show a lower rate of movement. And you see that between 2019 and 2020, the population of visitors becomes a lot more localized. And so what I did was, when I started running some numbers, I identified these 3 segments as being lower income, but sharing a lot of very similar characteristics, in that they all predominantly reside within about a 1-kilometer radius of Main Street, where we identified the centroid for Main Street. Now, what this means to me is that this is an opportunity for a community development initiative. If these segments are going to be substantial, or highly proportionate visitors of the area, where in 2019 they represented 13,786 visits out of 89,000 total visits, for 15% penetration. In 2020, that penetration more than doubled to 31%. And so in an economic recovery sort of setting, when planning, I would imagine that a community engagement initiative, community development initiative to integrate and engage with this group might be in a municipality's best interest. And also on the slide, you see a few key pieces of information. Most of them are apartment dwellers. Fewer live-in homes than the average in Newmarket, and many of the buildings are older. And as you can see, they skew very much towards the lower income side of things, with an average income of $82,570, which sits at about 36% lower than the average income in Newmarket. Now, for reference and for information, these guys tend to consume traditional media quite a lot, radio, television, newspaper, magazine primarily. They commute at a lower rate, so they're not quite as exposed to direct and outdoor advertising, and they do consume the internet, but on a very average basis. Now, on the other side, there's the opportunity group, and this group I see as a real opportunity within Newmarket, because it stands to infuse Main Street with a lot of extra dollars in many ways. Their food expenditure from restaurants sits at 12% higher than the average. They spend more for food in general, at a rate of 12% higher than the average. This is a very affluent group with $151,000 sitting at an average household income. They're primarily homeowners at a very, very high rate, 90% of them. And most of their homes are substantially newer than the other group. And if you look at the table that I have on the left side of the screen, The segments are broken down here for you. First class families, there are 2,499 visits in 2020 against a base of 15,995. So your penetration rate is high, but there is an opportunity to increase it substantially. So there's already a level of engagement that's promising. But can be increased through reasonable engagement initiatives. So overall, when we're looking at these numbers, there's a 24% rate of presence for these segments versus the 31% of the lower income group. But its penetration rate is sitting at 19% of its base market. So you already have a fifth of this particular subpopulation in Newmarket visiting Main Street, and there is an opportunity to leverage that some more. And in order to do that, obviously, you need to sort of conceptualize what they're like, what their lifestyles are like, and so on. And one of the things that stood out to me was the fact that they have a higher rate of visible minority presence within this grouping, at a rate that's 18% higher than Newmarket than the average for Newmarket. And they over-index for obviously all the financial and wealth profile characteristics. With a very high household discretionary income of 77,000. And whereas they share very few, they consume traditional media at extremely average rates, but they consume LinkedIn, WhatsApp, and other social media channels at higher rates. So they are much more tech savvy. So another opportunity to reach out through this group through specified media planning through social platforms. So I'm going to finish this off with a couple of key takeaways. The anonymized aggregated mobile data can provide deep additional insights into your target markets and your population base. It's really about linking, the ability to link. You've got the numbers from the mobile data, but being able to link the numbers to the lifestyles, to the behaviors, to the habits. That's sort of where the real goal lies. And that kind of sums up my third point as well. More data is only better if it can be linked together with the data you already have. At this point, that's all I've got. I'm happy to take some questions. I went over a little bit, so sorry about that, but please feel free.
Great. That was amazing. Thank you so much for sharing with us and also doing the deep dive on those two areas. That was fascinating. There have been some questions that have been submitted, so I'm going to just dive right in right now. So this came after you were doing the VMC. And the question is, do we have a sense of where these groups are coming from or spending time? So are they just coming to the VMC to work, or how do we know if they're shopping, or how do we know what they're doing?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And the data can be parsed out to understand workers from shoppers. We can look at it from the perspective of time of day, or we can look at it from the perspective of specific geofences. For example, we can isolate the RBC building, we can isolate specific office buildings as opposed to commercial spaces like Walmart. And even when it comes to a place like Walmart, if we see the same device appearing on a regular basis, we can infer that that device is held by a worker, right? And so what we would do then is parse out those devices that appear more regularly and isolate the devices that are less frequent, and be able to identify those who are there specifically for shopping. Now, in terms of understanding where they're coming from, absolutely, we can run what are called common evening location reports.
And that means being able to isolate the postal codes from which the devices originate. And that gives us an idea of which neighborhoods they come from. And that's how I was able to actually create the personas and the characterizations of the visitors, by being able to link the mobile device common evening location to the PRISM segmentation system.
Okay, great, thank you. So I know that it's anonymized data that you're using. So how do you know about the social values of these groups? Because you made some specific reference to that, and I think that we'd all like to better understand how you're able to determine such insights.
Of course, yeah. So as I've said, we link all our data together. It's modeled and estimated in such a way that we get these disparate data sets that are able to speak to each other through the postal code. So it's a correlation. It's not this demographic has this attitude. It's demographics that live in this postal code tend to share these types of behaviors or these types of attitudes. When it comes to the social values data set, that actually comes from our sister company, Environics Research. Environics Research is a survey company. They conduct primary research, and they have conducted the social values survey every year since 1983. It's a large sample national survey, and we then take that raw data, the respondent data, and we model and estimate it down to the postal code as well. So we're making the connection between the lifestyle segment and the social value through the postal code as the connection point.
I see. Okay. We got another question, and I know this is much more specific just to the Newmarket Main Street. They used to host the weekly farmers market close to Main Street, and then this year, because of the pandemic, it moved outside of the downtown core. And so the question was, can you get data over a specific series of dates or even just certain days if they wanted to take a closer look at that?
The answer is absolutely. We are able to identify. I mean, I once ran a piece. This you might like this. I was asked as a proof of concept to run a geofence for the Backstreet Boys concert of Blues Fest back in 2019. And so for that took place over the course of about 4 hours, right? Because we wanted to take into consideration people showing up, then the concert itself, and people hanging around and then leaving, right? So we geofenced, we isolated the stage at which the concert took place. We isolated the time period. We defined the duration, which was between 5 p.m. and 9 p.m. or something like that. And we were able to pull the data out for that specific event. And so we can certainly do that with a farmer's market. What I would do in a case of a farmer's market is I would look at both the market itself as well as any dedicated parking lots that are adjacent to it and things like that to increase the number of observations and make sure that it's, while at the same time obviously being careful to isolate just the farmers market and making sure that we're not getting any stragglers from main streets that are just sort of driving through, or highways or roadways and things like that. But yes, okay. The short answer is absolutely. You can identify by day, by time of day, by any specific duration down to the minute.
Okay, fantastic. And I'm going to do one more question before we wrap up. And you mentioned at the start that this is an opt-in opportunity for people with mobile devices. So given that, you know, certain demographics will always opt in and others won't, do you think that that's an important consideration when looking at the data? How representative of the population do you?
Yeah. No, that's an excellent question. And so what you're seeing here is the estimates, the weighted estimates that the numbers that you saw are weighted estimates based on the device observations that we then. Okay, so this is how it works. You have your mobile device. You get you sign up for an app. All right. You download the app. The app says you need to accept these terms. You accept the terms, and then it starts paying. For the more tech savvy, that's not a problem. For the less tech savvy or the technologically averse or whatever it might be, some people won't be using it. All of that is taken into consideration when we build the weighting. Okay. So the modeling and the estimating already takes into consideration data that we already have about technological aversion, about the different types of people that are more likely and less likely to have different types of apps. And we have worked with our data aggregation partners, our mobile data aggregation partners, to identify where their natural skews are, so that we can compensate for those skews. And so that's why we don't work with a single partner. We have 3 different mobile data aggregators that we collect data from, which makes it the single largest source of aggregated mobile data in the country.
Okay, that is fantastic. We're coming up to time, so I want to extend my sincere thanks to Nader for all the great information you've shared with us. You've got the best job in the world, really. This is so cool. And thank you for being with us. And you're going to send us a copy of your slide deck so we can share that with the attendees.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. And the link to the slide deck and the recording will be shared out with everyone within 24 hours. We also will be taking a little bit of a break from YRBiz for the next couple of weeks. The schools are coming back in, but we do have a session scheduled September 17th, and it's on agile business planning, which is the strategies and insights and tips you need to help navigate through all of these uncertain times and changes. So check out the link in the email that comes out, and we also have a couple landing pages on the Newmarket Chamber website as well as the Vaughan Chamber website, so you can access all the previous recordings there and sign up for the upcoming ones. With that, I will thank you again for participating and being with us, and we look forward to seeing you at another YRBiz series. Thanks everybody, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.